writing is work in that case, right? It's not necessarily something that I'm choosing the format or the length or the method. It's very much get it done so I can turn in a paper. Because I feel like a lot of students approach writing from that perspective. And I feel like flow is so helpful. I try to explain to them in class that, eventually you just kind of get in the topic and, you'll find it going, and, like, you just got to keep pushing yourself, or, like, we'll do free writing activities to try to get it going. But I was wondering, maybe walking around needs to be part of that methodology or that process. You're stuck, go take a walk around the hallways, get something to drink, come back. I don't know. I was wondering what you thought about those implications.
Mm-hmm. Oh. So the question that Lisa asked was related to whether or not kind of flow movement can work with academic papers. And personally, I have to do some kind of moving processing with almost everything that I write. So whether it's an academic paper, even like a reading response, I have to do it. It helps me. It helps me with revision. It helps me anytime I'm processing through anything, whether it's written or not. But I don't know that that's true for everyone. I remember having a conversation with someone who said that I think it was in 790, and she was stuck on one of her papers, and she got in the shower. And was that Mike Sife's class where we had to write those, like, short papers? Yeah. And she got in the shower, and then she had an aha moment and was able to get back out and write. So it was somebody in my response group that I think stepping away from it and stepping into yourself helps, even in academic work.
Yeah, I think that's funny because Sam, my fiance here, will laugh at me because I will spend a week stressing about a paper and percolating over it and writing a couple sentences and walking away and hating it and come back and rewriting them. And I started to realize that that's just my process, that although I might not be actively working on a paper for the entire time, that if I've been thinking about it really seriously for a week, that generally when I get to the writing act, I can actually do it. And I think that part of me wants to beat myself up about that. So I think you're bringing part of the acceptance of a writing process through your research here. You're showing that, that for a lot of people it does take, I guess, more time than maybe we want to think it does.
Sorry, Sarah, were you going to respond to that?
No, that's okay.
And I say, too, that is a part of the definition of writing that's so problematic when we're working with teachers. And I think it might be something, I don't know, Sarah, if you address this at all, but the idea that we often think of writing as being the butt in the chair and the hand moving or typing, and that is the mechanical, like, evidence of writing. That's not that's not how writing happens in any way, shape, or form. So it's almost as though it makes an interesting parallel to moving meditation in that the idea that sometimes what we think of as being writing is the action that we can see, when in reality it's so much more of the thought process. And that thought process is what where Joseph said they need to be frustrated. If you don't see a problem, if you don't have a place of stoppage in a way, or like question, then that movement forward through that can't happen. The mental, emotional, thoughtful movement, not the physical movement. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's the dwelling in. It's the dwelling space. One of the things that my teachers talked about and that I address in Chapter 5 is the discrepancy between writing for a test and writing for communication purposes. Right? So they are really frustrated by the way writing is assessed in West Virginia schools. So we talked about that a bit, and how students are taught to write one way for the test, and then they have to unlearn it. And I think that the way we expect to assess writing doesn't portray truly the way that writing really happens. Yeah.
I was about to write this, but it's as though we would say that great writing would be that someone had beautiful handwriting or something. Like, that's it. Yeah. Farthest thing from what it really means. We're really talking about great thinkers and inspired thinking, as opposed to that I mean, it's just funny to think of it as a joke, like I'm a great writer, like, you know, something like that. Anyway.
Actually, you can go from 115 all the way to 121. So on 120 is the big boom of kind of the active understanding that's familiar with the world. So the final so what of phenomenology, I think, for Heidegger's one.
It's about how to bring together the creative, what the canon called invention, with the edited product that, and even a kind of pseudo writing that is testable, and just how to. So, where are you going with that? You know, how do you link, as an English educator, how do you link the concerns of teachers and administrators for having their students write, material that will be good on the tests, and how to do the kind of writing and experiencing that you're having your teachers do?
I think so. Part of it is teaching students to recognize different purposes, right? And one of the things that the teachers in my study talked about was teaching students to write one way and saying, okay, this is how you're going to write for this test, and this is how you're going to beat the test, and then this is how you're going to write to communicate. So having a strong understanding of purpose and audience became really important for students and for teachers in that sense. And then I think that they are working really hard to give students authentic writing assignments and teaching students to recognize when assignments aren't authentic. So being able to really dissect a prompt, or to think about a prompt as what is being asked and what expectations are there.
I think that if we, when we experience authentic writing, that possibly there's going to be a dip in the other kind of writing. But I think if we're patient enough, that it will come back with power and voice. And I don't have the answer to how to get policymakers and non-writers to understand that. But I think that we go ahead and do it anyway, as best we can.
And I think that was the conclusion that these teachers came to, that it's writing for a different purpose. So writing to pass the test is just writing for a different purpose than writing to communicate.
I agree with Megan in that she said, even if we as teachers emphasize the process, I find it very difficult for my students to buy it. They just want to get it over with. One of the things that to me is so difficult about teaching was that that split personality that I felt of like you said, they know that the writing that they are having students do for this test is not writing that exists anywhere else in the world. And it's a false sense of that they're teaching them something that isn't for learning. It's performative and limited, and something that isn't. So I felt like that too, that there were times where I would say, like, this is how real writing, and I still feel like that now. There are times when I'm teaching my students, and the only way that I think of it, maybe this is too noble, but in Fahrenheit 450, what is it, 454? Where they know that at some point knowing those books is going to be the important for the world. So I feel like with my students, and they will even say, like, what if we can't do this in our classroom? And I think, well, then at least you'll know the right way. At least when there's a time when learning is valued in the way that we understand it as being of the world and in the world and for the world, that they will have had that voice. So I don't know. That's the way I just make that devil's bargain. If it, Anyway.
So I see Megan is asking about process and getting students to buy in. And I think one of the things that was successful for these teachers is practice, right? So it becomes regular practice, especially with reading and writing. One of them talks about, and again, this is in chapter 5. Why are we talking about my chapter 5 so much? One of them really talks about instituting regular silent sustained reading. And when she first started doing it, her students were like, we're seniors, we hate this, we shouldn't have to read, blah, blah, blah. And over the course of time, they're practicing reading, she's practicing with them. They are now saying, so she's been doing it since the beginning of the year, and I think I have her, she wrote about it in her journal, and I have her journal from, I guess, November. So between August, the end of August and November, her students had learned to love it. That now she can't get them to stop. So if they have 15 minutes or 30 minutes of silent sustained reading at the end, the class almost unanimously is like, no, we don't want to stop. And that writing workshop has become that way in some of their classes too. That it's getting comfortable with its continual practice, that it's always going back to the process not without having a product, but without emphasizing the product in such a way that the product becomes the most important.
Can I add a little anecdote to that? With my ninth graders, I did sustained silent reading where I read and sustained silent writing where we would share. So I had a block of maybe 20, 25 minutes where we would do both. And they could choose what they wanted to do, but they had to do both. Had to. And I agree that once the students developed kind of this habit of doing it every day, they ended up not wanting to actually do the real work of the class. They were really getting involved with writing or with reading. So I think it's just, and that's part of it. If we're elementary ed teachers out there, that's part of the balanced literacy curriculum is having that daily independent writing and daily independent reading as part of on top of the other types of instruction as well. So there's my 2 cents. But yeah, I agree.
Rekha, I love this question, the idea of familiarity with exercise. So of the 4, only 2 of them were regular, like all the time, hardcore exercisers, and both of them had been overweight and had lost a lot of weight. One, Alex, more so than Annalie. But the other 2 were not necessarily regular exercisers, but they both walked a lot. And I think that was a strength of this work because they didn't have to be runners, right? They didn't have to be like hardcore exercisers, that just walking in the woods made a difference. So I think that they were in some ways novices who were thinking about that kind of body process and thinking process together for the first time. K-12 teaching versus college teaching is important. I think one of the things that I miss most about teaching high school is having that everyday practice and being able to connect with my students every day. Some of them saw me more than they saw their parents. And I'm working really hard to try to create that kind of relationship and community in classrooms with students I just see a couple of times a week. And I found ways to do that, but they connect, but I wouldn't necessarily write about them in this dissertation.
Yeah, Joseph, that's what I actually thought about that after I typed the first one, and I said you can use technological means. And one thing with students that I'm seeing where I feel like I have created a much more cohesive community, even though they only meet twice a week, is the Twitter assignment that they're required to do. So I see them reading and sharing information because that's part of the requirement, and then talking throughout, and I chime in too. So I feel like I get to know them much more as people and as learners, which to me is important for teaching. And I get to see the things that they're interested in, and the information that they think others are going to be interested in. But if I only saw them I have one class where they only meet once a week, and it's an hour and 50 minutes. And I'm going to do something if I teach this class again where they have a discussion board, but I'm not part of it, and it seems very insular. It doesn't bring in voices from other discussions. So that's something I feel like that's what social media can support too, in that way. And not that I want to be friends with them on Facebook, but I do think Twitter works well for that.
Well, also we have Canvas, and Thor and I felt like our students needed to see themselves as digital media producers, and so I had him take pictures of his lab when they were just working on it, and we put that up on the main page so that every time they click on that, they see themselves in that practice. And I think that practice is so important to, as you're saying, Maggie, to have some way of the activity happening regularly, so that it gets automatic, or so that some of it can free up other kinds of mental activity. And again, the being witnessed and seeing oneself as composer, uh, those things are just vital, and it's, I think all that's consistent with the methodology and ideology or ontology of phenomenology.
I think there are other ways to make students feel a part of a regular practice in a regular community, even if we see them 2 days a week also. So something that's important for me is knowing everybody's name. And it sounds like a given, but my students, they freak out about it a little bit. So by the third or fourth class, I know everybody's name, and they think it's crazy because they don't have that experience. Or giving them regular groups to work in every single week, right? So that they do literature circles and they form these little mini communities within our classroom community. That kind of relationship building is really important, and it's something that I drew out from my high school classroom. They need that. They need to feel continuity and community and practice. So Brecca's asking, how would I like to see my work used? I would like to see it read. I keep thinking about Maggie saying that she feels like her dissertation is a letter to someone who...
A letter to no one who never wrote to me.
And for now, I just want it to be read. I've worked really hard on it, and I think it's going to work, and I would like people to read it.
Well, you got 5 captive readers here.
Thank you.
Did you see my comment, Sarah, that I said it was beautiful work, very you?
Thank you.
Sounds like you when I'm reading it.
Thank you.